Hello, welcome to your last story of the week, and this is called Dreaming 4. The water's clearer than before. I see every detail of Kit's fine face. It takes my breath away. His hand takes mine. The cold of it numbs my fingers and sends an ache all the way up my arm. Slowly, gently we float towards the daylight. At the surface, the ice stops us, so we're trapped like butterflies at a window. Kit lets go of me. He reaches up and pushes with all his strength. The ice doesn't budge an inch. His head drops, his shoulders shake. I can't bear to see him like this. Yet something strange is happening. There's a handprint in the ice at the place where Kit touched it, and now it's gone dark, like it's starting to melt. My heart leaps. I point wildly. "Look," I cry, though he can't hear me. "Look!" He reads my face, and when he turns and sees it too, the ghost of a smile appears. Chapter 18. Laying Fires. "Get your backsides out of bed." I tugged the covers over my head. "I'm counting to 3. The voice came closer. It didn't sound like Ma. "All right, Dorcas, we heard you." The warm shape next to me wasn't Eliza either. My guts went tight as I remembered where I was. Gracie swung her legs round and got out of bed, letting icy air in under the blankets. She fumbled in the dark for her clothes and then lit the stub end of a candle. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. "Time for work," she said, holding the little flame towards me. "God, you look done in already." "Feels like the middle of the night. What time is it?" "Just after 5. Come on now, hurry." Getting out of the warm bed was agony. As I reached for my clothes, I saw 2 bruises on my upper arm, and with a jolt remembered last night on the stairs. Someone had grabbed me hard. "Blimey, Tilly!" Gracie had seen them too. She came closer with her candle. "Who did that to you?" "Don't know," I said, because I couldn't quite believe Kit would do such a thing. "Well, it's bruised up a right treat," said Gracie. "Looks like someone pinched you. Let me see again." "Not now," I said, pulling my frock on quick. It was much too early for more ghost talk. The water at the washstand was frozen, but I didn't want to appear before Dorcas looking like a dog's breakfast, and the ice broke easy enough. A quick smooth of the hair, a fix of the cap, and I was ready. Gracie led the way with the candle. She didn't seem flustered this morning and was back to her usual chirpy self. There was nothing remarkable about the staircase either. If it hadn't been for the marks on my arm, I might have thought I'd imagined the whole thing. At the bottom of the stairs, the warmth from the kitchens hit me. The gas jets burned so bright it made me blink. We went straight to the servants' hall where Dorcas was waiting, looking neat as a pin in her striped frock. First, she straightened my cap so it sat properly on the back of my head. Then she showed me how to tuck up my skirts to keep them from the dirt. "Now, we work quick as lightning," she said, fixing me with her pretty grey eyes. "We're back below stairs by 7:30 at the latest. That's when the family rise, and it's not proper to be caught at your work. The Barringtons don't want to see you covered in coal dust." But hadn't Gracie said I'd see them? Today! I tried to keep the disappointment from my face. "The fires'll need a lot of coal this morning," Dorcas said. "It's perishing cold." "The usual rooms," said Gracie. "Yeah." "What, all of them? Even the bedroom? Can't we skip it today, just this once?" Dorcas rolled her eyes. "You know the rules." "But it's such a pain lugging coal all the way up there." I glanced at Gracie and noticed shadows under her eyes. She was also twisting her apron again. But Dorcas was having none of it. "There'll be fires where fires is needed. That's what you're paid to do." She turned to me. "You take this," and she handed me a wooden pail topped with a tray of brushes and rags. "Gracie, bring the coal up to the library." Gracie sloped off, muttering to herself. Dorcas led me back out into the passageway. Doors slammed. Cook shouted orders. The kitchen maid scurried to and fro with armfuls of plates and baskets of vegetables. Round a corner and up some steps, we came to a door covered in green felt. Yesterday I'd seen Dorcas go through it with countless trays. On the other side of the door was above stairs. and that meant the Barringtons. My heart beat faster as Dorcas reached for the door handle. "Stop a moment," said a stern voice behind us. We both turned. Mrs. Jessup stood in the passage. "Where are you taking her?" she said, meaning me. "To do the fires, Mrs. Jessup," said Dorcas. "We need to get on." As Mrs. Jessup's gaze rested on me, my insides went all of a flutter, like I'd done something wrong again. "Very well," she said. "There's a jar of ointment in the kitchen for Tilly's hands. See that she uses it. We can't have our staff looking ill-treated. This is a fine house with standards. We need to remember it." Dorcas shot me a sideways look. "One more thing," Mrs. Jessup said. "Gracie must do the front bedroom. Tilly will be needed down here once cook starts the luncheon." And with a whisk of her skirts, she was gone. Dorcas narrowed her eyes at me. "Can't keep her all out where you're concerned, can she?" "It's 'cause I'm new, I suppose." "No," she shook her head. "It's more than that. Anyway, we've got work to do. Come on." She opened the door and we stepped out into a vast hallway. The door closed behind us. Everything went quiet and still as a church. "This way," she said. I stared about me. Honest to God, you'd have fitted our whole house inside this very hallway and still had room for a garden. The ceiling was high and arched, the floor all dark red marble and so polished it seemed a shame to walk on it. Rows of paintings in thick gold frames hung on the walls, and up ahead, to my right, a staircase curved up and up, the handrail done in fancy wood. No back staircase, this. Lamps shone from the walls, right up to the first landing and beyond. "Tilly!" I stopped gawping and hurried over to where Dorcas waited. We went through a door into a dimly lit room. Bookshelves reached from floor to ceiling, so I reckoned this must be the library. Though it was as cold as the attic in here, and the place was quite a shambles. Books covered every surface, floors, desks, tabletops. Chairs were strewn about, rugs kicked up at the corners, and dirty glasses littered the mantelpiece. The fire was a heap of cold ashes in the grate. Dorcas looked about her, hands on hips. "He was up late again last night by the looks of it." "Lord Barrington?" "Mind you, he's usually in London, and when he's here he don't sleep well. Not now." My ears pricked up at this. I was dying to hear more, but Dorcas had started clearing the glasses and tidying the chairs. She beckoned me over to help. As we knelt down to straighten the rugs, she dropped her voice to a whisper. "I've worked here over 10 years now, and I've seen how things have changed. Really, ever since Master Kit died, nothing's been right here since then." "What do you mean?" "Well," she sighed, "they say people never get over the death of a child. It's certainly true in this house." An ache filled my chest. How sad this all was. "You've gone pale. Not sick, are you?" said Dorcas. She looked uneasy, like she'd said too much, and it wasn't her place to gossip. Getting to her feet, she rubbed her hands briskly. "I'm all right," I said, but I got up too fast and leaned on a nearby chair to steady myself. Glancing down, I jumped clean out of my skin. A sleeping man was sprawled in the chair. At least he was only just asleep, since he twitched and stretched like he was about to wake up. I backed away in shock. "What is the matter?" said Dorcas as I pointed to the chair. Her face softened and she lowered her voice. "Oh, is it his lordship? How the flip was I supposed to know who it was?" "Right, Tilly, stop dreaming," she hissed. "I'll open the shutters, you do the lamps, then we'll see to the fire. If we're quick and quiet, he won't even know we've been." Once Dorcas turned her back, I took a good long look at him. Lord Barrington's legs were crossed neatly at the ankle, and his head rested back against the cushion. He looked familiar too, achingly so. I took a shaky step backwards. This was Kit's pa. One peep at him told me that. He was fair, like Kit, and though his eyes were shut, the same long lashes curled out from under his lids. How odd to be stood here, staring at Kit's own flesh and blood. Then I sensed Dorcas beside me. "Handsome, isn't he?" she whispered. "You should have seen the sun." I gasped out loud. She'd known Kit, living, breathing Kit. It was a struggle to contain myself, but if I opened my mouth now, it had come out all jumbled up and sounding crazy. She didn't believe Gracie's ghost talk, so why the heck would she believe mine? Now come over here, said Dorcas. She pulled back the hearthrug and put a cloth down on the floor. She bid me kneel beside her. Watch, she said. There's a knack to lighting these open fires. It was a job to tear my gaze from Lord Barrington, but I paid attention best I could. I'd never lit a fire in a fancy fireplace like this before, and it was an art the way Dorcas did it. She cleaned the grate, then blacked it till her hands were filthy and the hearth shone. Next, she took kindling sticks and paper and had it aflame in an instant. She added what coal was left, then sat back looking pleased. Never use more than 7 kindling sticks, that's the rule, she said. Then she turned to me. Look lively, there's still the dining room and sitting room fires to do. And that bedroom, said Gracie, who'd appeared in the doorway with 2 full coal buckets. Dorcas put a finger to her lips. Shh, his lordship's asleep in here, get yourself upstairs. Can't I do the dining room instead, said Gracie. Now then, I'm warning you. A groan came from the chair. Dorcas froze. I held my breath. Lord Barrington's legs twitched and he turned over. I'll go with her, I said. Dorcas glanced at the mantel clock, then back at us. All right, give me that coal and get gone. Be quick, mind, or Mrs. Jessup will have my guts for garters. Out in the hallway, Gracie grabbed my hand. Bless you. It's not about lugging stuff up and downstairs. I'm used to that. What is it then? It's that bedroom. I hate it. It gives me the creeps. Always has done ever since I started work here. They keep a fire burning up there every day, and we ain't allowed to let it go out, not even at night time. Sounds a bit odd, I said. Well, it was his room, see? The boy. Their son what drowned. A thrill went through me. Tell you what, I said, thinking fast. Why don't I go on up and do the fire? You could just bring the coal. It'd only give me minutes, and I'd no idea what I'd find up there, apart from this fire business. Even so, it was a pretty exciting start. Would you do that? Really? Gracie's face lit up like I'd given her a gold sovereign. I left you on the stairs last night, remember? I owe you. But there's other stuff to do in there too. It's all very particular. Well, I'll make a start. The rest we can do together, I said, which seemed to please her. Now tell me, which room is it? Up the stairs, turn right, last door on your right. It's at the front of the house. I waited till she was out of sight. Then I grabbed my skirts and legged it up the stairs. Chapter 19. Waiting on the Dead. At the top of the stairs, I turned right. Up ahead was a passage full of doors. My brain went blank. Which room was Kit's? Left? Right? Then Gracie's words came back to me, and I headed for the furthest door. I counted each one as I passed it, stopping at the last to wipe my hands on my skirt. The handle felt cool as I gripped it. I checked over my shoulder. Gracie worked fast, so I didn't have long. 5 minutes, maybe, 10 at the most, and she'd be back, with her buckets of coal. I pushed the door open. Legs shaking, I stepped inside. The lamps were lit and the room was unusually warm because a good fire glowed in the grate. I stared about me. Books lay open on a table. Fresh clothes were draped over the chair. There was a half-empty glass of water, a pen with its lid off, bed covers all crumpled and slept in. My stomach dropped. It was the wrong room. Someone had spent the night in here. Any minute they might be back and I'd get caught where I shouldn't be. Too late. The door handle turned. Someone was coming in. I froze. There was nowhere to hide. My heart started pounding. My mouth turned dry. Here I was, snooping again. It didn't look good at all. A pair of grubby hands and a bucket of coal appeared. Gracie stuck her head through the half-open door. I gasped with relief. I got this from the library. Dorcas didn't need it all. Here, take it, she said. She handed me the bucket. I took it, bewildered. So I was in the right place. This was Kit's room. Over by the hearth, a pair of filthy riding boots caught my eye. They stood upright like someone had just stepped out of them. A chill came over me. What queer business was going on here? Gracie, why? I'll be back in a minute. I'm just going to get the water. What water? Suddenly I didn't want to be left here on my own. Every morning I bring up a jug of hot for the washstand. It sits there and goes cold. She must have seen the shock on my face. I know, mad, isn't it? It's her ladyship's special request, though God knows we've got enough to do without waiting on someone who's dead. My heart began to spin. So, wait, this? I waved an arm at the books, the used pen. Is it all Kit's? Are these things his? Gracie shuddered in the doorway. Yes, as it was on the day he died exactly. No one's been allowed to move nothing since. We just dust, that's all. It was too strange for words. All right, so people wore black when their loved ones died. The Queen had pined for poor Prince Albert for years on end. Yet this room, so full of kit, was like a blinking museum. My heart was beating very fast. The room felt too warm, too close. But before I knew it, I'd crossed to the bed. The head-shaped dip in the pillow was still there, and the covers had been thrown back carelessly. It was like he'd just got up and left the room, like he'd be back any minute to get dressed in the clothes laid out on his chair. Heck, I even reckon the sheets might still be warm. If I just slid my fingers in... Don't touch nothing, cried Gracie. I snatched my hands back quick. She looked at me oddly. Do the fire like you promised and keep your hands off the rest, she said. I'll be back in a jiffy. She shut the door behind her. Everything was quiet and hushed, but for the murmur of flames in the grate. This had to be the saddest, strangest place I'd ever been. I didn't know quite what to do with myself, feeling a great ache grow inside of me. I went over to the window, pulled back the drapes and eased open the shutters. My breath misted up the cold glass. I rubbed it clear and saw it was almost daylight now. The sky was pale, the lawns deep white, and the driveway flanked by banks of snow curved round to the main steps beneath me. Wait! This was the window, the very spot where yesterday that figure had watched me arrive. It had slipped my mind completely, but now I shrank back from the glass, shivering. So someone did use this room. Or maybe it wasn't a person at all. But that thing that had followed us up the stairs last night, the thing I struggled to believe was Kit. I looked nervously over my shoulder, wishing that Gracie would hurry up so we could get back downstairs again. But I still had the fire to do. I went to the hearth and got down on my knees, just like Dorcas had done. There was still plenty of heat in the coals, so I added more and swept out the ashes. The sight of a good fire cheered me a little. Once I'd gathered up the brushes, though, the flames had died down and the grate suddenly filled with smoke. I cussed loudly, blew on the fire, took off the extra coals, added a few sticks. Nothing worked. Soon he was dead as a doornail, and I was up to my elbows in soot. The one task I'd been left to do, I'd messed up. I started to panic. I had to get this flipping fire going. As I crouched down, I sensed the door opening behind me. It closed again softly. Something told me it wasn't Gracie. I turned around, dead slow, almost too scared to look. Chapter 20. A kind of spell. A stranger stood before me. She was slender as a reed, with pale cheeks and dark curled hair. Her eyes were tight shut like a person in a trance. What a beauty she was. I hardly dared take a breath for staring. She was dressed from head to toe in black. Her frock, a high-necked thing with narrow skirts, was well cut but plain, set off only by the gold brooch at her throat. Something stirred me. These were full mourning clothes. What a person wore for a loved one newly dead. Yet set against the woman's white skin and lovely face, the effect was not just sad, but tragic. She opened her eyes and, turning towards the hearth, saw me. "Goodness," she cried, clutching her chest. "You gave me quite a fright." "Same here," I thought. Her eyes were dark and huge and gazed at me closely. It dawned on me then who she was. I felt sick to my very boots. "Lady Barrington?" I scrambled to my feet. "I won't be a minute, your ladyship, if you'll excuse me." "My, you have been busy, haven't you?" she said smoothly. I glanced at my black hands and even blacker cuffs and quickly hid them from view, hoping to God she couldn't see the cold grate behind me. "You must be Matilda, the new housemaid." I nodded. Mrs. Jessup tells me we're lucky to have you." I was taken aback. Wasn't I the lucky one getting work here after being caught trespassing? It's such a job to find decent staff these days, she said. Which made sense to me now, stood here in this creepy room. Maybe they were lucky in a way, for Gracie was right. This place really was all about the dead. Lady Barrington seemed to lose interest then. She went over to the window and turned her slender back on me to look out over the lawns. I wondered what she was staring at. From the tilt of her head, she seemed fixed on a certain point, way beyond the trees. The lake, of course. Did she do this every day, like some sort of vigil? My heart turned at the thought. So, Matilda, she said, gazing on out of the window, tell me about yourself. I do so like to know my staff. I was unsure how much to say and uncertain how to address a grand person's back. Well, she stepped away from the window then, easing herself into a chair and beckoning me to stand before her. I was glad, since it meant she still faced away from that shameful fire, though I couldn't hide it forever. Tell me about your family, she said as I stood in front of her. I'd have been happier telling her how fast I could scrub a pot. I live in the village, I said. Lived, she corrected me. This is where you live now. And your parents, are they well? You could say that. Oh, well, your ladyship. Come closer so I can see you properly, she said, smiling warmly. I inched forward. Close up, she was even more lovely. Her hair was held up at the sides with little combs. The rest fell in thick curls about her neck. Her hands, smooth white ladies' hands, were folded neatly in her lap. And those eyes! Fine things they were, but blank somehow. It made me think of my ma now Eliza had gone. Her eyes had that emptiness too. I knew it wasn't proper to stare, but I couldn't help it, and found myself studying Lady Barrington's brooch. It was round, gold-edged with a pale woven pattern of flowers in the middle. What a pretty thing it was. She noticed my interest. Her fingers went to her throat. Isn't it lovely, she said. It's very dear to me. The flowers are made from his hair. Can you see? His hair. Oh, Lord. I fought the urge to back away, instead making myself leaning close to look at the brooch, knowing exactly whose hair was inside it. And it was just as pale and fine right here in the daylight as it was in the dark of my dreams. Her ladyship studied my face. I dreaded to think what she saw there. Remind me of your parents' surname, she said suddenly. I straightened up. Higgins, your ladyship. This seemed to please her. You look familiar, that's all. So then, tell me about your family. And she was so sweet, so warm, I felt myself fall under a kind of spell. My sister and my pa are on their way to America as we speak, I said. How thrilling. Not really. They didn't tell us they was going. It came as a proper shock. And my sister nicked stuff from us too, money and all sorts. I stopped, wondering if I'd been too free with myself and spoken out of turn. But her ladyship seemed keen to keep me talking. How dreadful for your mother, said Lady Barrington. Is she bearing up? I reckon her heart's been broke. Something caught her fancy in this, and she sat forward in her seat. Oh, and has it been hard for you? It hasn't been easy, I said carefully. See, they never said goodbye. Lady Barrington breathed in a sharp breath. Such a tragedy, she whispered, turning so grave, so drawn I thought she might faint. Your ladyship? Give me a moment, please, she said, and took a tiny bottle of salts from her skirts and sniffed delicately. The colour came back to her cheeks. Are you all right? I asked. She gave me a most beautiful smile. Quite well. And as I have you all to myself, there's something else I need to ask you. One look at her face, and I reckoned I'd tell her anything. Are you recovered? She said. Pardon? From your ordeal on Sunday, it must have been frightening for you. So Mrs. Jessup really had filled her in? When I went to speak, the words seemed to stick in my throat. Yes, your ladyship, it was, thank you. A young man saved you, am I right? The words wouldn't come. My eyes seemed fixed on her brooch. If it were mine, I'd have pulled it apart just to touch Kit's hair again. but it wasn't mine, and she was waiting for an answer. Yes, your ladyship, I said. He did. I was lucky. You were, Matilda. Her chin trembled. And the name of your rescuer? I hesitated. The spell was broken. There was plenty I couldn't tell her. Heck, I couldn't even meet her eye. Will Potter, your ladyship. Ah, yes, the butcher's son. Clearly, you owe him your life. Yes, your ladyship. And it wasn't such a lie. Will did bring me in from the cold, after all. I prayed this was the end of it, and that she'd heard enough and wouldn't bring up the trespassing part of things. Sure enough, she rose from her seat and moved towards the bed, where she spread her hands over the pillow, like I'd almost done myself. It felt private somehow. I didn't like to watch. Please, get on with your work now, she said over her shoulder. I didn't need telling twice. At once I crossed the room and knelt at the hearth, hoping to block her view. I had to get this blasted fire lit again. My hands shook as I stirred the ashes. Then the door opened behind me. It was Gracie with a steaming jug of water. Alarmed, I glanced at her ladyship. She was still leaning over Kit's bed in a kind of daze. Quick, I hissed to Gracie. Help me get this fire lit before her ladyship sees. Gracie's face fell. You won't let it go out, have you? Not on purpose, no. Now get in here and help me. We only had seconds. In a flash, we'd emptied the grate and started again. Every brush, every scrape felt ear-splittingly loud. Come on, I muttered under my breath as the flames licked the paper. Gracie laid the sticks on top, then added on some lukewarm coals. A small, feeble fire began to take. Quickly, I swept up and emptied the ash into my bucket. It would be hours before the room was properly warm again. Lady Barrington straightened up, drifting back to her place at the window without so much as a glance at us. I breathed out. We'd done it. The fire was lit. Then I dropped the pan. I flinched as it clattered against the hearth. Sorry, I whispered to Gracie. Are you quite finished? Said Lady Barrington, a new edge to her voice. She turned from the window. Her gaze slid past me to the wretched fire I so desperately didn't want her to see. She let out a cry. What on earth? This isn't a proper fire. This won't do at all. Flying across the room, she barged past me, so I stumbled sideways into a table full of books. She fell to her knees at the hearth and scrabbled around in the coal bucket like a mad thing. In no time, her fine white hands were black with dust. Her hair came unpinned, falling across her face and down her back. The sight was sickening. Your ladyship, please, I said, trying to stop her. She took no notice, muttering over and over, Don't worry, my darling, we'll keep you warm. I was horrified. Gracie had begun to cry. Get Dorcas, quick, I said to her. I didn't know what else to do. Gracie legged it out of the room. I turned to Lady Barrington and crouched beside her. Please get up, your ladyship. You must let me do the fire. You'll ruin your frock. We'll get you warm, she kept saying, her face wet with tears. You'll be better once you're warm. It was no good trying to talk sense to her. I might as well have spoken to the wall. I got to my feet, legs shaking. That moment the door flew open. Dorcas's face was stern. Get downstairs, Tilly, she said to me. I'll deal with this now. I couldn't seem to move. For goodness sake, just do it. She stepped aside to let me pass. Don't say a word about this to Mrs. Jessup, she said in a low voice. We keep it to ourselves, understood? I gripped the banister all the way down the stairs. My legs could barely hold me. Somehow I found my way through the felt-covered door, and once I was below stairs again, all the shouting and banging brought me back to myself. About time and all, said Cook when she saw me. Blimey, you look a funny shade. Wash your hands, then come and stir this sauce for me. It was the simplest task I'd had all morning. Honest to God, I was glad of it. We stop there. More next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.